That's
You know,
it.
yeah, speaking of, something that you were a part of, one of the things that, the metal scene or the portion of the metal scene that really ended up getting me into this music was the thrash scene. You guys obviously a very big part of that. And
So what was it about the thrash scene that attracted you?
it was just I don't know, it was something about the music. When I listened to like
Was it
Bonded
the
by Blood,
energy? Was it the guitars? Was
it
it
was it
the
was everything.
right?
So
Gotcha.
I was probably, and I ended up getting into it later, like in the early '90s. I was, 6, 7. I was, going into high school back then. But I will never forget hearing "Bonded by Blood" for the first time, hearing, "Ride the Lightning" for the first time, and hearing, some of the, early, even the Heathen stuff back then. All of those records that had a really big impact on me, and you know I was a little bit too young to see the start of it, but I had to imagine. Did you imagine that it would become what it did when this whole
Oh,
thing started out?
hadn't a clue. The
Yeah,
last thing on my mind in '83 or '84 was going to see Metallica at a sold out Levi's arena.
yeah.
Dude, 2 days ago, I just saw that with my own eyes, and it was unreal. It was unreal. I mean, and no, to answer your question, absolutely not.
Hmm.
The
No,
last thing on my mind.
I knew we had something special going on,
Yeah,
the Exodus thing. I was in a band that was playing a little bit more progressive metal, and then the
Amble
Exodus
Chorus.
guys came out, and they had like this ridiculously over raw approach to playing hard rock metal. I mean, the metal thing was just starting out, and they were all in it, and it was like, holy shit, this is really fun to play.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
you just get that it's a playing style that it comes from the
Hey,
hands.
Tony, have you ever heard
And
of Amble Chorus?
I have.
oh
Dude,
yeah, that was an ancient band.
so
That was a pretty influential
these
band back in the day.
Doug and Thane back in the day were I would go see, this is before I even played guitar, dude, and this I would go see Doug and Thane. And they were really ahead of their time with the guitar harmonies
Yeah.
the arrangements with the keyboards, and Aaron was such a great dude. Amble Chorus was a badass band, dude.
Hmm.
It was definitely different.
And yeah, and it was different than what we ended up doing a year or a year and a half later. But they stuck out, and they had a great following, and they really had a lot to do with the evolution of our music back in the day.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
I will die on that hill.
yeah. One of the things, especially when I think of Exodus, for example, um, one of the things, it's funny, my son for Father's Day ended up getting me a reissue of Bonded by Blood. I ended up getting, and I hadn't listened to the album, and
And how old is he?
he's 18. He just turned 18.
Wow,
Mm,
that's
So
awesome.
he's into that music. And so he bought
that's
me,
crazy.
yeah, he bought me that album. He goes, "Hey, I got this for you for Father's Day." And I had listened to it in quite a while, but when I was playing it, I was listening to a lot of these guitar like parts and harmonies that you and Gary played. And when you look at music that had came out back then, I mean, playing that kind of stuff was just like unheard of. Nowadays you hear that a lot with a lot of metal music, but back in those days, when you listen to some of the guitar harmonies played on Bonded by Blood, even like some of the stuff on the first Anthrax album, a lot of these bands, where you guys were like the pioneers of this. And
Well, so as far as Bonded by Blood goes, I think that those harmonies aren't really like they're more rhythm harmonies
Mhm.
on that album. Like if you want to really listen to some old harmonies and stuff like that, Amble Chorus had a lot to do with, like, I think subliminally all of us back then in the Bay
Yeah,
Area.
this one here.
I
It's
can't
like,
hear it.
that all came from Uli.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. No, but
But
Thane
that's
and Doug
that's
were
kind of
doing.
like where they came from. And we've been like, okay, so back in those days when Amble Chorus was trying to do all this heavy, progressive harmony oriented. I mean, you know, our influences were like early Scorpions and Thin Lizzy and so on.
Absolutely.
It's all harmony guitars.
Absolutely.
So I got way into it early. And then, like when I was helping Exodus do their first Turk Street demo, I helped, you know, Gary and Rick. They were responsive to some ideas that I had, you know, when I was helping them record it.
Mhm.
And you know, there's like in Deliver Us to Evil, Gary plays this thing, and it's really neat. I showed him how to do it, and he just took it and ran with it. It was awesome. He still plays it today.
Yeah.
But fast forward to now, like, all that influential stuff that I was way, you know, affected by, you know, with Uli and Scorpions and Thin Lizzy and so on, you hear it all over the Nefarious stuff, and it's just as fresh as it always has been. And it really kind of shocked me. Like one of the last songs we recorded for the record called Snarler, I play these outrageous melodies, they're harmonies at the end. Rick and I play them. And there's nothing really super difficult about them, but it has this, like, they jump out at you because of the way that the melody is, and it's really
it follows
neat.
the rhythm behind the melody. I've been
Well,
working.
then there's that. It builds.
Yeah. The actual harmony follows the rhythm almost exactly, but it's way higher register. You know, and it's pretty badass. I've been working on that a lot this afternoon.
It's amazing because it's so simple. You know, honestly, Rick, when I was coming up with that shit, it was just like, you remember I was telling you when we were coming up with a lot of these melodies, you know, they're pretty straightforward and not really difficult to play by design. I mean, there's something to be said for simple stuff. If you listen to a lot of the stuff Schenker does, you'll see right away what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Schenker will come up with the most beautiful, you know, eye-watering melodies, and there's nothing really to them. They're just beautifully simple.
Yeah.
And
Here we
that
go.
is another huge influence too, you know.
That's the song again. Here we go.
Yeah, and you know, and I think people, you know, it's interesting you mentioned both of those guys, because I think people like Uli Roth and Schenker, I think sometimes their influence, they don't get as much credit for that. But if you talk to almost every band that, you know, basically came out maybe in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, a lot of those guitar players were highly influenced by those guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
They know, because if you go to any of their shows, they're filled up with disciples.
Yeah, and you know, look at the amps they're playing out of. I mean, you know, everybody's trying to get that tone. And dude,
it's like Schenker still to this
and
day.
Uli Roth, where would we be without Michael and Uli right now?
Yeah.
Oh God, I don't know, man. But there's just been a lot of really important innovators. I would say, you know, without getting too heavily into it, there's like the top 10 innovative guitar players, and those two guys are definitely in there. You know,
100%. There's no question. Gary Moore, Eddie Van Halen, Richie Blackmore. I mean, even dudes from like Tom Schultz, dude. Tom Schultz from Boston. Holy shit.
Yeah, he knew how to put together really beautiful songs with melodies and harmonies.
What an amazing dude, man.
Yeah, that record blew my mind. It's like, if I only talk about, I mean, I mentioned Thin Lizzy and I did mention Uli, but it was Boston too. Boston really got me going with a lot of that stuff.
Dude,
I used to always wonder how the hell the mix and the sound of that album was as good as it was
because
back in the first
genius,
album.
bro.
Yeah.
He's a genius. This is way before digital. Everything he did was to 2-inch. So,
yeah,
you know, and he just, the recording techniques, the mics, the performances, his layering of harmonies, it's just, the dude was so far ahead of his time. I got goosebumps talking about Tom Schultz. Dude's amazing, bro. I listened to the very first Boston album and I just sit there shaking my head going, every one of them is a freaking hit, dude.
Yep.
And it's just like, so good, so good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you bring that up, because I remember listening to that for the first time, and I'm like, how did they get this album to sound so good back in the 70s? Because nothing sounded that polished back then.
Skills. Straight up skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tom Schultz got skills.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, that was
a
how,
groundbreaker. That record
Yeah.
really broke ground.
I mean, think about it. It's funny
I think
because
maybe as much as Van Halen 1. You know what I mean?
No,
Yeah.
Van Halen 1 was not the same. Van Halen 1 was super critically important, don't get me wrong.
The
But
guitar
it was
one.
way more raw. It was way more like, okay, this is kicking over everything over the cliff, you know, like let's really go for it here. Being polished was not what Van Halen was. It was
No.
bringing the power.
Right,
Yep.
right.
You know, that's what that happened. I mean, don't get me wrong. That is an insanely critically important record.
Yeah.
No question about it. But it's not the same kind of polish. Like you would hear it. Schultz did something that Foreigner started, but he took it farther. You know, back in those days when we were like in high school and learning how to play and always looking for something heavier. You know, like
Marshall amps, dude, that Foreigner used to use. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because when I did the Merkins show with Phil Demmel, one of the songs was a Foreigner song, and I would listen to the original cut, and I was like, God damn, those guitars are badass, dude. They sound so good.
And it was a Les Paul and a Marshall.
Yeah,
That's it.
That's it.
I don't even think they had overdrives on it. I mean, it sounds too. It's like that Priest album, Stained Class.
Yeah. Oh god.
That isn't very distorted either. It's
that's
like
my favorite. That's my favorite Priest album in the world.
It's very calmly recorded.
Yep.
You know.
100%.
Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.